gallery in a two-person show alongside Nikki Bungie. And Adam has kindly come down today to talk to us a bit about his work. We're going to start by looking at a piece called The Singing Tree. And Adam, I'm going to ask you about one of the subject matters that I notice you often incorporate or address in your work is this idea of togetherness. And there's a look at social media and its play in contemporary communication. And in this painting, I feel there's a suggestion that we're together, there's a group gathering, but are they together, or are they, as a result of potentially social media, still acting alone?
Okay, well, I mean, with Singing Tree, let's start with the composition. I suppose it's composed in a way that you're sort of standing slightly above them, that the viewer could be intruding on what's going on in the painting, or could be welcomed into what's going on in the painting. The idea behind the painting is, yes, they're coming together to engage with the central object in the middle, a totem of communication, let's say. But they're, although they're closely brought together, they're almost disconnected from one another as well. Some are wearing headphones. So they're, in a way, they're also unaware of each other. So in a way, yeah, they are together, but they are alone together. And it is a sort of, the idea is based on how we go about our communications today. So a lot of my work deals with past and present forms of communication. The idea of community, social interaction, being part of something bigger, a sense of security. You know, in past traditions, it may have been to deal with the immediate inhabitants and their surroundings. Maybe didn't have such a far reach. And when you compare that to now, where we have communication which is global, but at the same time is insular. It's very focused, and you can edit yourself on it. You may have that reach, but it's removed from the immediate of a person. I mean, there's an immediacy in how we engage with it. So there's this sort of contrast between these two elements, and I think it's quite interesting that for me right now, you know, we're sort of still in the wake of lockdown, and prior to lockdown, there was lots of discussions about overuse of social media, saturation. You know, were we engaging too much with it, with online social networks, and this idea of editing ourselves and a performance, let's say, sort of more choreographed. And then through lockdown, we have become isolated, and we have engaged with that technology more so, and it's become a sort of positive thing. So
what you're describing is that we have started to use this new technology, this new social media in the last year as a way of coming together, and in a way it has brought us together rather than potentially driving us apart, which is, I suppose, potentially the notion of what it can achieve.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So it has brought us together, but generally, you know, when we engage with those devices, you know, be it a phone, a mobile phone, the recipient who's engaging with it he's suddenly, he or her surroundings become removed. They are focused on the screen and who they are communicating with somewhere else. So the initial surroundings fall away and they become removed. And so I find that sort of flip side of things interesting in that sense.
Yes. So that, what you've just said about the surroundings means I'm going to ask you something you weren't expecting, which is the backgrounds.
Yes.
In quite a few of your paintings are pixelated, abstracted, falling away, almost dissolving places that feel completely imagined and otherworldly. And so hearing you describe that makes me think maybe that is exactly what I think, funny enough, this painting that we're standing next to and the one slightly further along
Can you feel it? Is it that one? The one here?
Yes.
Yeah. The canvas. Yeah.
Does what you're describing, which gives you the idea of maybe what the people are experiencing, but this sense of placelessness.
Yeah, and also it's you know, it's a synthetic environment. The fact that, you know, we see an image on the screen, it looks real, it pertains to be real, but it's actually you know, it's just an illusion. It's a simulacra. It's a load of zeros and ones, an algorithm. And in these paintings with the pixelation, you know, the idea is to sort of show them the image breaking up. The idea that it's not real, it is an illusion. It's that, you know, it's a play on reality as such.
A play on reality. Okay, so that takes me to something else I wanted to ask you about, which is the historical feel of your work. So I feel that there are imagined worlds. There's quite often a suggestion maybe of religion, maybe of ceremony, possibly of totems. And I wonder whether you're addressing the fact that totems have always existed, ceremony has always existed. Has it always been a means for drawing people together? Has that been one of its primary purposes? And is the difference today that we just have different objects of worship?
Yes, it has always been a way of bringing people together. You know, there's a French 19th century sociologist called Émile Durkheim, and he talks about the idea of totem and how that is a symbol to bring a community together in a shared response, a sort of call and response. So it becomes an intuitive action, and that's passed down. It can be, they may have lost the meaning behind it because it might have been learned orally, but they still, it brings them together. It makes them feel secure and part of something. And so I do think that our totems have changed, most definitely. And by incorporating that idea of worship from past customs or ceremonies, be they religious or folk customs, you highlight our relationship with our totems, our devices, our way of communicating, our way of being part of something bigger, a need to go beyond oneself, feel that we're not disconnected, that we can feel secure within our environment.
So this thing about disconnectedness and togetherness and why totems exist and why people come together to worship brings me to this painting here called Beacon.
Yes.
So I think this painting brings together a lot of the sort of what I consider your core elements of what you're trying to communicate. And something that I find really fascinating about this is that it feels totally timeless. It feels the choice of the limited palette means I don't know what time of day we're in. I don't know whether I'm hot or cold. There's an awful lot about my day-to-day experience that you're stripping away here. And what you're doing is you're saying, this is a place that existed, and you'll tell us the history of the place. But what I wonder is whether the fact that people still go to this place to gather is this place has become a place of worship without maybe people even knowing that that's what it's become. Or maybe it's not worship, maybe it's just a sense of togetherness and community.
I think with Beacon and with Cortege, the next painting, they're both about pilgrimage. And pilgrimage is about search. You know, it's about finding oneself, being connected to something bigger, looking for answers, information, knowledge. And we do that all the time. We do that when we even put a keyword in a search engine. You know, we're looking to gain information. And with a lot of my paintings, there's this sort of overlap. And so of past and present, and the idea of, by looking at the past, we may learn about the present. There's this sort of residue, there's overlap all the time. And with Beacon and with Cortege, that's why the period or the time where the place is sort of, it's a no time. It's a mixture of past and present together. So it is imagined, but it's imagined from real points of reference.
Yes, exactly. So the real point of reference in this piece is obviously Denge in Kent, where they built the now defunct early radar
fantastic,
systems,
yeah.
which are obviously not, well, they're not used as such. But then in Cortege, I mean, it almost takes me back to sort of Egyptian times. You know, I feel like that is something very other, and yet there's something familiar about it.
Yeah, I mean, with Cortege, it is a pilgrimage, and it again, I'm going to go back to what I said before. It's this idea of search. It's this. We're not really sure what we're going to. But we hope that when we get there, we'll find an answer. You know, I mean, with Beacon as well, there's this group are surrounding this main object. They're sort of transfixed, mesmerized by what's going on, and there's only one character here which looks back to the viewer to sort of say, come and join us, come and have be mesmerized by the search, the quest to be part of something maybe bigger than ourselves. But with regard to the subject matter or the main object within the painting, you mentioned it. It's the sound mirrors down in Denge. People make a pilgrimage to see those objects. They know that they were overnight defunct because radar came in, but there's something that still attracts them, and it is, I think, possibly it is an historical reference. It's understanding the past so they can feel placed now, how they feel within themselves. But also, I think they're so odd and out of character within the environment that they're in. And I quite like that flip between something that is slightly askew, doesn't feel in place. And I mean, they're almost like brutalist pieces of architecture. And I'm wondering maybe in the future, future generations, when they visit places of interest, would it be foam masts? Would it be satellite dishes? How will they react to those objects which suddenly maybe take on a different character? So that's what I'm playing with in this painting. If you think about, say, like Stonehenge, we're not totally sure what it was meant for. There's theories, but we're not totally and utterly sure about what it's about. And people still go there to visit, also on special festivals in the yearly calendar, to feel connected.
Yeah, exactly.
To something bigger.
Yeah, yeah. So that takes me to my last question, which is more to do with your process, because your process is a very important part of what you're sort of, achieving with the effect of these paintings. And I know you work in many, many layers of oil glazes to build up this it's like a slow release painting. But as a consequence, they have these quite dreamlike, sort of slightly mirage. And as you get close to them, they sort of pixelate almost.
Well,
but
they fall apart, don't
they?
They
sort of fall apart like a television screen would.
Yeah.
And I wonder which came first? Did what you're interested in, which is this digital communication, which pixelates and falls apart, come first, or did your technique come first, or were they a marriage?
They were a marriage, I would say. Originally, I painted in a very different way, and I soon found out that oil paint has its own history, and it was fighting against the subject matter of my work. So I decided to strip my painting back. I did this when I was studying. Because we've talked about communication, we've talked about pixelation, I've mentioned satellite dishes and mobile phone masts. I wanted to look at our devices that we use today, but the origins. So where did they come from? And in doing so, I went back to the 1950s, where there were advances in computers and satellite navigation, the space race. And when I was looking at that, I was looking at old documentaries from TVs. So the quality wasn't superb. Televisions tend to, old TV sets had a sort of surface buzz. There would be a sort of static across the screen. The color would be soft. There would be a softness about it. The picture would be slightly soft as well. But also looking at printed material of the time. So looking at old lithographs, which, in National Geographics or Life magazines, and looking at the characteristics of those, that printed ephemera and the television's images, I wanted to replicate some of those characteristics. So with printed lithographs, the image is soft, the colors tend to sit on the surface, the blacks stand proud, the reds punch, it's sort of Kodachrome period. And so having looked at that, I suddenly thought, right, okay, I can give a historical timeline in the subject matter that I'm discussing to my viewer subtly without them really knowing about it. And maybe it has a sense of nostalgia, but it is literally just to give a sort of timeline. So in doing so, I worked out this process, which is basically a watercolor technique, which it totally goes against oil painting because it's the opposite. You're going from light to dark. So your lights are what the surface of the canvas, the bare canvas maybe. So I start I build up in lots of glazes. They're quite watery. Initially, the painting starts almost like a ghost. And it's gradually gets denser in color and tone. It can take up to 20 glazes. It's very time consuming. The whole idea is to be slowed down time, and because I'm dealing with subjects which are about immediacy, and I quite like taking them and slowing it down and being quite meditative and contemplative, but also referring to pixelation and the screen. There's a sort of a back glow in the paintings, in the layering. So there's a light behind them. The glazes allow the colours to come through from the back. So it, you know, there's a religious feel. It's like a stained glass window, or it's like a screen. You know, like on our phones, it's backlit.
Yes, which show it, so they feel almost, some of them feel so bright and vivid. It's like that feeling you get when you look something on a screen and think you can't reproduce that in real life. But if anyone gets close to it, it's you. And you also use fluorescent paint in your work, don't you? Which yes. I suppose again is with a similar aim.
Yeah, I mean, you get by using the fluorescence, you're optically playing one area against another. So there's a sort of optical punch.
Yes, an optical. That should be the name of your next show. Optical punch.
Optical punch. I'd be very happy to do that.
Well, that's a really excellent summary and introduction for our visitors, some of whom will visit, some of whom might not be able to. But thank you for coming down and taking the time to explain all of that.
You're more than welcome.
And thanks for watching.
It's been a great chat. Thank you.
Pleasure.